Welcome to another episode of A Pint with Seaniebee, coming to you all the way from Brooklyn, Fort Greene in Brooklyn. I guess this is New York, and so we do have a sponsor for this show, which is Hans Tooth Bar and Stitch Bar, which my guest is actually familiar with because he's worked there with me on a couple of occasions. Please continue to like and share the podcast. We're getting good response from you all. Thank you very much for that. Today's guest is a very good friend of mine, one of the most creative people I know, a joyful fella, and he's always positive and upbeat. This is Craig Damrauer. Craig and I worked together when I first came to New York in 2008. He was at JWT. He has a very illustrious advertising career, but he is here today, in my view, to talk more about his art, because I see him much more as an artist, and I think he does too. Welcome to the podcast, Craig.
Thanks.
You've been on a podcast before?
No.
We were talking about this, and I was going, I'm not sure Craig's really up for this. He's like, really, Sean? But he's very kindly agreed to do this. We'll see how it goes.
I have to do a little bit of community service.
Yeah, thanks for that. Yeah. You're from Colorado, right?
Yeah.
And you were born and raised there?
Yeah.
In Denver?
Yeah, Denver.
Which is where I lived for the last 2 years. And I love it.
I know, the Broncos.
What was your background like? Was it very artistic?
My mom and dad are scientists.
Oh, doing what?
My dad was taught organic chemistry, and my mom was an adjunct, so she kind of moved around. But she taught.
Did they meet one night late in the lab?
Probably in
she
college.
Took her pin down, let her hair down, took her glasses off instead of
University of Michigan. Probably. Although, actually I bugged her the other day about it. She said that there weren't a lot of females in the chemistry department at the time.
Right.
So she was quite busy.
There's going to be some great chemistry jokes we can crack here.
You just did.
And
they had a lot of chemistry, obviously.
So they were very academic.
Yeah. So they were very. I mean, they're scientists basically. And my mom, and so a lot of. I remember very vividly lots of conversations at the dinner table that would go over my brothers and my head, because they would just be talking about research or about different things and scientific stuff. But then also, I think scientists are trained to think a very specific way, which is experiment, step, repeat, experiment, step, repeat.
It's very rational.
Completely. But it's also, my brother and I talk about, because my brother's gone on to become a scientist. He works in Boulder. So we talk about how our brains are different and how our brains are the same, and I feel like they're very, very similar. I'm not well schooled in all the literature. I'm, better schooled in the artistic literature, but we both basically take ask a question and then start fucking around in order to try to find an answer.
You give him the crazy idea and he goes and tests it for you.
Correct.
Right.
If I could, yeah.
And what did you find? Did you, because I love living in Denver. It's such a hidden part of America, because people just fly over it, but when you're actually there, it's great. It's outdoorsy and it feels healthy.
When I was growing up, it had a nice punk rock culture and a lot of weirdness. And
so did you go to college in Denver?
No. So I wanted to get out of Denver really badly.
Why?
And what was that Groucho Marx quote? It was something like, "I've had a lovely time, but this wasn't it."
Right.
When he was leaving some party. I'd been there forever, and I wanted to go somewhere else. I basically went to the college that was the furthest from Denver that I got into. So I went to this little school in Maine called Colby College.
Wow, that is far away.
It was really far away. And I had this ridiculously romantic. I'd never been to Maine. I had this totally romantic. It's beautiful.
So what did you study there?
I studied English. I went there to be a physicist. And,
right.
Yeah, I wanted to go straight down the line that
line.
the family had set. And I really struggled. I struggled, to be honest with you, with the math. But the one thing I'd never understood, and I'm not sure quite why I've never understood this, even almost to this day, but I've never understood that you can actually do something that you like.
Brilliant.
In this world.
Yeah.
I think it was a little bit of you have to do something that makes sense, that you can pay your bills with or whatever. So I never thought that I could study art. I never gave it a thought. And then writing, I took a little bit of time off of school. I hated it. I hated it. And it wasn't because I struggled with the studies. I just never been around that type of rich kid before. Yeah. They're really odd people. And I took a semester off, and I just was like, what do I do? How do I deal with all this shit? And I liked to read. based on the Razor's Edge loafed, which meant I laid in my backyard and read the whole summer.
Right.
So I knew that I was like, oh, cool, I can actually do what I love to do and then major in it and whatever. And then at some point in college, really, really, really strong writing professors. And so I found writing, and then that just sort of like set me on this road of sort of doing things that I like to do that I was actually relatively good at.
It's a common theme in a lot of the guests that I've spoken to.
Oh,
this.
what?
Just this idea that the people kind of our vintage were the kind of first that were like sort of semi-empowered to go. I think the kids today, I think if you take your kids, you would be, I think, pushing them to be happy or do whatever they feel, what they want, find the thing that they like. Whereas I agree with you, like back in the day, it was parents were pushing their kids to do things that showed them in a good light, or that maybe were a reflection of the amount of points they got in the final exam at school. Your scholastic aptitude then decides what you do for your life.
Completely.
And a lot of people were doing things they didn't like, and maybe it's because of technology or the internet or just the openness that we have, that we were able to do that. And how did you do in English then when you were up in Maine? Was that in Maine as well? You just
I went back to that school. I don't know why. I actually don't quite know why I went back to that school, but I'm actually glad I did. But I went back, found writing, found English, and I did relatively well. I'm not gonna. I can't produce the transcripts.
And then did you come to New York after Maine?
No, I didn't. I went to this may be a longer podcast than you want. I had been working in food service for a while. At college, I worked in the bakery. Over a few summers, I had been a dishwasher. One of the latter dishwashing jobs was at a fancy restaurant in Denver, the name of which I'm completely forgetting. And I kind of caught this weird bug. And I remember actually now very vividly why. It was they made their own ravioli one night as a special, and I was like, holy shit, you can make... It doesn't just come out of a can.
Yeah.
And there was something really interesting about that. So then I was a baker, and I went back to Denver, and I knew that at some point I would go to graduate school for writing, but I didn't know when. I just wanted to write and fuck around, and so I ended up getting a job chopping vegetables at this restaurant. I chopped vegetables, and then I slowly kind of rose in that restaurant. Before I knew it, I was the kitchen manager.
What age were you?
I must have been about 22.
Right. So you'd done your college.
Yeah. I'd done college, and I was done. I was a grad. I had a big fat piece of paper saying that I was competent to do nothing at all except chop vegetables. But then they hired a chef, a head chef who was an ex-culinary teacher, and I just pestered him with questions. Like I bothered him constantly.
Right.
And then he would get really sick of telling me stuff, and so he would hand me these books. One book was Food Science, which is called On Food and Cooking, which everyone should own. And then eventually I worked and worked and worked, got tired of working, left one job, went to another job, left that job, and then kind of realized that I needed to leave the town and go to graduate school. Went to graduate school in Arizona, in Tucson, at the University of Arizona for writing, but then also started working in fancy pants restaurants, like the really fancy ones in Tucson.
Right.
Made it through graduate school, understood.
So are you all into that Hester Blumenthal kind of molecular gastronomy? Have you heard of him?
No, I hate all that shit.
You hate all that? But that's kind of chemistry and food, yeah.
No, I think all that stuff is... No, but I understand chemically how to make a sauce. Like, I understand what goes into making the sauce. I understand what goes into making the salad dressing or vinaigrette. So I can... Once you know how it all works... then you know how to experiment with it. Yeah. And I'm not interested in... So you
mean stopping things congealing or the oil not separating from
exactly. Like making nice quality.
So was it a close call then that you didn't become like a famous chef?
I don't know if I ever would have become a famous chef, but I did. When I got to New York, I trailed at one of the fanciest restaurants in the city and kind of had to make a decision at that moment, which was... Do I want to spend 12 hours a day,
I know, it's tough.
6 days a week, and 2 floors below the sidewalk in a kitchen?
Which restaurant was it?
It was called Oriole. It was on 62nd and Madison.
Right.
But I definitely was headed in that direction, and this was that moment when chefs were starting to become well known. I think about Anthony Bourdain had written a few pieces in the New Yorker, and sort of identifying chefs as human beings and people who had thoughts and who weren't fucking morons.
Yeah. I think one of the things about it I'm really impressed with restaurants that can just deliver day in, day
It's
out.
incredible.
Because I think if I ever did it, I'd really, really work hard to get like that great review or those stars, and then I go, okay, done that, fuck it, you know. But my favourite restaurant's been going for 26 years. And
Which one is it?
In Sydney, it's called Bon Recordo.
Okay.
And the same guy throws the fucking pans and pots at his chefs in the back. He's a screamer, but you know, he it's all done for perfection. I know, but he has the same staff for 20 years because they believe. They say stuff like he cares about the food. Yes, he occasionally bowls us out, but that's because we haven't done it right. It's scary, but like the food is delicious. But it's simple peasant food, which I like.
Which I love.
It's white tablecloths and it's fancy sommeliers, but it's just scooped onto your plate.
I think that's all. I mean, I think Julia Child at some point said, you know, the more arranged your plate is, the more hands have been on that food.
That's a good point.
And and I'm the same way. Like,
and do you cook at home?
Yeah.
Okay. So you love that was
Great
handy
pleasure.
for your wife.
Yes,
Finding a guy who can cook and a very nice guy as well. Rare.
It's well done.
And so then you made this call. Was it a financial call that said, "There's not as much money in food"? Or
I never. You know, it's funny because I moved to New York. And the most I'd ever made in a year was $14,000. I had no sense, and I remember very vividly during that time, I just couldn't bring myself to go underground for 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and so then I stopped. And then a friend of mine's mom was like, "You should go work in advertising." And
as you do.
Yeah, exactly. you're good for nothing.
Yeah.
I mean, she did, and she got me an interview with this guy who was kind of well known at the time, and now he lives on a boat and makes high-end tequila.
Brilliant. Who's that?
But Andy Berlin, do you know
I've
his
heard
name?
of him. Yeah.
He was amazing.
Where
guy.
was he? Deutsch or somewhere?
He was at the place that I worked at was called Fallon Berlin. It was Fallon had decided to open up a New York office, and he was crazy.
Yeah.
He was out of his mind. It was great. I had my fucking resume, which said that I was really good at cooking. I had my and nothing else, and I had a 20-page short story that I had written. I must have written it in graduate school, and I handed him my dumb resume, and I handed him that 20-page short story, and he sat there and he fucking read the whole story, which takes like 20 minutes.
Good on him.
In front of me, page after page after page, and I just sort of sat there and stared at him and stared out the window. Totally, it's amazing. And then he goes, "You shouldn't work in advertising." And I was like, "Well, how do I know that?" And he was like, "Okay, fine. We'll give you a shot. We'll give you a
He
job."
meant you were too good, though, did he?
I don't know what he meant.
Right.
I think he meant that.
It's like a Coen Brothers movie. I can see this.
So
you
crazy.
sitting there.
I think he really, he'd be played by Josh Brolin. But he,
you'd be John Turturro.
no, I'd be fucking Buscemi. But he, and so God, Turturro would do a good job. Subsequently thought about it. I think he may have been right, but I think he meant that advertising would suck all of what you need out of you. And what's his name? Banksy has always said that he thinks that advertising has stolen all the great artists. Yeah. And in a way, I agree with both of them. I don't wish I had taken it as advice because we wouldn't be sitting here, but I do think about that moment a lot. But he basically said, we'll give you a shot. We'll hire you for a month, and if you like us and if we like you, then we'll keep you. And then the amount of money that he handed me was like, I mean, nothing in advertising, but it was so much more than I'd ever seen in cooking. Yeah. And so all of a sudden I was like, okay.
Yeah, I'm always dissing advertising on these shows, but it is a very meritocracy when it comes to paying people. I mean, I think if you're good, they tend to throw money at you when you're a kid.
I agree.
And that's fair. Unfortunately, some people play the game and get paid a lot more. They're no good at all.
Yeah, how would you describe that?
We have a few people who won't mention them.
It's a meritocracy plus brown kiss-assery.
Plus politics.
Exactly.
So what he's referring to is his first major art project. He's been trying to segue into it, as you can probably hear for the last 10 minutes. He's one of his most beautiful things he's done is a book and website and all that stuff called The New Math. And I'll let Craig explain what it is.
Oh God, thank you. That's really nice.
It's an open-ended question. It's an open brief. This was the book that when I first met Craig, when I was pushed over to his desk when I first went in for interviews in JWT, I was told to see him about this. So it was a blue book that was Absolute genius. Look it up online. Newmath.com, I guess.
No, it's More New Math.
Morenewmath.com. Explain what it is and how you came up with the idea.
That's a tough one. I mean, the way that I described the equations themselves, and it was like a 10-year project basically, but it was an attempt to describe the world using basic math and
with words instead of numbers.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, that's right. With words in basic math. So like dog is equal to cat plus loyalty.
Brilliant.
Modern art is equal to I could do that plus yeah, but you didn't.
So there are all these little beautiful equations that make you think and are funny, and there's loads of them. I guess you can still buy the book on Amazon.
You can't buy the
book. Okay,
yeah,
I have a copy somewhere.
That book fell apart.
It did, yeah. I mean, it was a beautiful blue book, but the binding or whatever was just bad.
Disaster.
Yeah.
I did. So what happened was that I did. I left the house. I was feeling pretty glum, and I left the house with this tiny little notebook. And I said, "You cannot come back to the house until you've filled up the notebook." Wow. So I wandered around Manhattan, and I would write things, or I'd draw things, or whatever. And I came back, and at that point, I had written 2 of the equations, and still to this day are kind of the good ones. And then I had come up with another idea for a set of books. I had written this little book called Things I Learned from My Alien Abduction, which was just this little piece of advice, like just wear clean underwear.
Yeah.
Like that.
Yeah. At what point did you say to yourself, I'm an artist now?
About a week ago. Yeah, that's a battle. I mean, I agree. I think that at times I feel like when you say that you're an artist, you're admitting a kind of egotism, and that your thinking matters. In a way that bothers me tremendously, because in a way I don't know if the universe really needs any more art.
Maybe.
But I think I'm wrong.
Well, it probably needs more art than it does shit ads.
Commerce, for fucking sure.
It probably needs more art than it needs politicians, and So I think there's a lot of things the universe doesn't need, but I think art would be kind of low down the list.
I agree with you, but I think that if push comes to shove, the artists are the ones that are going to get eaten first.
I think also coming from advertising, it's like we write something and we are often told it's not right.
Oh, interesting. Yeah.
And we are constantly seeking approval for what we do from an idiot client usually, right, who has no idea.
Yes.
And so we get caught in this kind of, and that's why the frustration of the emotion is the woman hugging her kid at the end of the ad, right? Really simplistic stuff where you have higher minds working on it from an artistic point of view.
Right.
When you say Banksy said advertising stole all the artists, I would say maybe that was right in the 80s and 90s, but I would not say that's
I agree. Well, I think that's
today.
right. Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, I think the money thing is tipping art in a specific way. I also think that a lot of art nowadays is really, really bad, and it doesn't move you in any way, shape, or form. And so, I mean, I battle with it a lot because I think that art, I mean, at least the work that I do is very, very uncommercial. For a long time, people would be like, an ad company would call me up and say, would you write equations for our product? And
you never bid on that.
I never did, and I never
did. Which is very laudable.
I guess, but I was making, I wanted a division in my life. Like I wanted it to be pure. I did get paid to do it for the Atlantic for a year, but I felt like that was editorial.
Yeah. Well, that's like a cartoon sort of thing.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, basically it was.
And they get paid fuck all for
I got volunteered.
So you were in. Did you? The question I was kind of asking was, when I say maybe you didn't say you were an artist, but was that a purpose decision to leave the business because it was sucking something out of you and you wanted to get back to roots, or you were over the?
No, I think I've always seen advertising, and I probably shouldn't say this out loud, but I've always seen advertising as a way to make money.
Yeah.
And I've never seen
the whole film industry, independent film is based on that,
that's right.
Short film is based on, ad agencies come along with $1 million to do a shoot that you could do for $50,000.
That's really true. I remember that really vividly, by the way. My first commercials I made. But
it's a very fair trade-off.
I agree.
Advertising is using you more than you're using advertising. Don't get any just
Right.
It's totally true. I mean, if you are of no use to them, they would not hire you. That's the way.
No doubt.
They're vicious bastards.
No doubt.
So the fact that they do pay you well and that allows you to fund your art, exactly. No,
I would do it because it was a job and because it paid me, and then I would not do it when I could, so that I could do the things that were far more interesting to me, to be honest. I mean, I think that the reason I would say that I'm an artist now or a writer, I think the way that you define that is that you say, I don't know the way I think unless I write. I don't know the way I think unless I make something. And that's really, for me, that's the deal, basically.
well, there's elements of science and physics in that.
Completely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
And another physics type of project which I loved was the branches thing.
Yeah.
Can you explain that?
Oh, that was
It's beautiful. Yeah.
My wife got a job down in New Orleans, and I felt like we wanted a break from New York and decided to move down there. And some of this was driven because I was walking around advertising agencies and I was seeing all this technology that people were starting to experiment with. There's a sensor in your iPhone that's called an accelerometer that people now know the name of. But there was a time when no one had ever heard of it. But it's
I don't know what it is.
So it's basically the thing that tells your iPhone when it's been moved.
Oh.
So basically, it's just
the one that irritatingly flips it on its side when you don't want it.
No, that's exactly right.
Okay.
There's two sensors that are really interesting.
Or something.
Yeah, exactly. There's an accelerometer and then there's a GPS sensor inside your phone, and so those tell your phone a lot of really interesting pieces of information. One is when it's been moved, but then the other is that when it's been moved in space.
Right.
And so I started playing around with those sensors. I bought a few, and then I know a tiny bit about electronics from when I was a kid, and I'm not afraid to take things apart, and that's all science.
Yeah.
That's all growing up in a wild house of scientists. And I was taking those sensors, and I was programming them so that they would gather visual spatial data as tree branches moved in the wind. So what I was trying to do is get the tree to essentially make these drawings and make these sculptures by capturing a lot of data.
Right.
So I was doing that in New York. Got to New Orleans in, I think, 2011. I got there in July, and I think it was in August that they had a hurricane. The hurricane brought down tons and tons of tree branches, and so I would start to drag them into my studio, ostensibly so that I could then use them to put the sensors on, but I started then taking them apart. I started cutting them into segments and then rebuilding them. And then I realized that I could get them to dance. And I bought these incredibly tiny little propellers that were made for these micro model airplanes. And I would put them on the tips of the tree branches and try to get them to do these
Amazing.
really oddball movements. So essentially what I did then is I took these tree branches, rebuilt them, like with all these interesting little segments, dangled them upside down on these very, very, very thin wires, and then put these propellers in their tips, and then wrote code. I would run wires at the center, and then I would write code that would turn the propellers on and off so that I could get movement.
So a museum bought this piece, or showed this piece.
Showed it, yeah.
So the effect was you're in a big room and you see this sort of upside down tree.
Exactly.
That actually just is moving seemingly of its own accord beautiful. And,
really neat.
Again, really original. I think one of the things, again, when you talk about moving to New Orleans, at the time, you took up this mantle of writing these sort of little, well, I don't even know what you call them, little short stories about your life in New Orleans that you put on Facebook, and you sadly seem to have told Facebook to go fuck itself. But you had these beautiful long pieces that you used to occasionally just drop onto Facebook that were absolutely beautiful.
Thanks.
Really evocative, and I'd never been to New Orleans. And
when you're really a writer, like that's what you do. Like that's how you make sense of it. So I think I think I wanted something that had a little bit more substance. So I was just throwing.
There was one I remember. I mean, these were 5 years ago, I suppose. I mean, there was one I remember where maybe an upstairs house went on fire.
Yeah.
It was brilliantly written.
That was terrifying.
I know. Well, it was terrible. You captured it. Then the other thing that you're doing, which is just mental, is the Citizen Kane project. I mean, again, we're just finished. We're recording this, and it's actually snowing outside in early March. So we just had the Oscars, which of course were riddled with why they're so anti-black or pro-white or whatever. Chris Rock did a pretty good job of
I wish I didn't see
dismantling that when he was hosting. But for the last while, Craig has been working on a very interesting project featuring the movie Citizen Kane. Tell us about it.
I'm basically going frame by frame through the movie Citizen Kane, and I'm erasing the entire movie with the exception of the black characters. There's 22 black people in Citizen Kane, and they play the following roles. There are 3 loiterers, there is 1 driver, a man named Joseph who's like a servant for Kane, there's a woman who plays a maid, and there are 2 bands. And that's it. And they amount to, the movie's an hour and 59 minutes, they amount to 2.9 minutes of screen time.
Right.
This is the most iconic movie that was made in the 20th century.
Yeah.
For me,
the effect, he just showed me before we pressed record here, he just showed me where he's at with this, and what you see is this scratchy whiteout going on for minutes and minutes and minutes with the soundtrack of the movie playing in the background, and every so often a brief glimpse of African American comes onto the screen and disappears, and there's something disturbing and trance-like about it as well. It's very compelling to sort of sit there and even watch it.
I don't think I'm representing new news, to be honest with you.
Right.
I think that in fact I think it's quite old news. I think that I mean, and if you look at any of the points that anybody makes, I mean, I have this Baldwin quote right here that sits over my desk. We're talking on my desk. You know, the Baldwin quote is, I mean, this quote really does it for me, but it's from an essay called Theater, the Negro in and Out, and it says this, it says, "Now the Negro actor, after all, is also a person and was not born 2 seconds before he enters the casting office. By the time he gets to that office, he has probably been an elevator boy, a cab driver, a dishwasher, a porter, a longshoreman. His blood is already thick with humiliations, and if he has any sense at all, he knows how small are his chances of making it in the theater. He does a great deal of acting in the casting office, more probably than he will ever be allowed to do on stage, and whatever his training, he is not there to get a role he really wants to play. He is there to get a role which will allow him to be seen." I mean, this sends chills up my spine, to be honest with you. That's Baldwin. I mean, that's 50 years ago.
There's a
and so I mean, but when you talk about the Oscars, to me, it's like it's nice that it's talked about now, and it's nice that it's become an issue. But the truth of the matter is that it's been an issue forever.
Well, this was actually the main opening point that Chris Rock made. You know, his joke was, "Why is it suddenly this year?"
Really?
Issue. You know, so you should find it online. He did a great job. I mean, he walked a wire, but he made people laugh. And you know, I love comedy and I love comedians who tell the truth and who are not afraid. So what's going to happen to this Citizen Kane thing?
So it's going to make its debut at a museum in New Orleans in August 2016, so in just a little bit. So I have to...
And it takes ages to do this, right?
Yeah,
how long does
I've
it
been
take?
doing it since 2012.
What's the name of it? Have you got a name for it?
Yeah, it's called All the Black People in Citizen Kane. This is pretty obvious.
Well, look out for that. It's a fascinating piece. And again, there's, you know, as Chris Rock said, there's the talking about it, and then there's the way I think that human psyche can understand it by seeing things like this, because it's very easy to talk about it. You know, it's very easy to talk about casting and why people of color don't have great roles, but then you read something from 50 years ago, and you go, okay. So you know, you're at this point now in your life where you found a nice equilibrium between, I guess, the freelance piece and the art piece. Would that be fair to say, or no?
Well, it is for sure fair to say. You know, I don't have work past Monday, so
right. Does that worry you, living your life like that?
You know, I've stopped worrying about it. I mean, obviously there'll be some really hard times if I don't get more work. But, you know, it's like, what are you going to do? I mean, I know how to cook, you know what I mean? So if I have to, I can go cook. But I don't tend to worry.
Well, you also know how to work in an ad agency. If you want to go back in there, any place will hire you.
No one wants me. If I'm not working an 8-hour job or an 8 to 10-hour day job at an advertising agency, I'll work an 8 to 10-hour day job in an art studio.
Yeah, it's very hard. I find it very hard. I tried this when I was writing last year in Denver to just get up in the morning and leave the house and get somewhere to write.
Right.
You know, even if I wrote fucking crap for the day, but at least I was doing it.
That's the
very
whole
hard.
process.
It was very hard for me to do, and I did it. I didn't really know whether I wrote much good stuff, but
it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
it really doesn't matter. I think
the discipline of doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I get up every day and I meditate, and I am the fucking worst meditator. It's so bad. This morning it was like grocery lists. It was terrible. You know, but like you just have to do it. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and other than that, there's nothing more that can be expected of you. I think, you know what I mean. but you also have to be okay with the doing part. You know what I mean? Like you have to be okay with trying and getting. You know, none of this stuff happens easily.
What do you like? You know, you're not that old. But what do you say looking back on your own things that you've learned? What would be the little couple of pearls of wisdom you pass on? Either if you're able to time travel back to your Denver kid self, or even pass on to your own offspring.
I think I would have tried to make the artwork the thing as opposed to the thing that paid. And I'm not sure that that's probably the right advice, to be honest about it, because I think that because I get paid in other places, I don't think about my artwork commercially at all. No one's going to pay for any of this horse shit, to be honest. Nobody. But
at least not until you're dead.
Yeah, exactly. And all of a sudden, like, why not? But no, I mean, I think that, I was on a ski lift the other day, and this old man wanted to give my daughter advice, and he said, find something you love and get paid for the thing you love.
Yeah.
And I like that. I thought that was a pretty good piece of advice. Yeah.
It is.
And I would much rather spend my day, with my head in the clouds. I don't know how that gets funded, you know what I mean? Because I operate better there.
Yeah.
The only advice I might give myself is to try to not have too big of a life of things.
You mean responsibilities, or?
I guess I don't know.
Actual physical things?
Yeah, I think it's physical things.
Yeah.
I wouldn't lump my children.
I agree with that.
I wouldn't lump my children.
You could go with them.
Yeah, they're pretty damn
You mean
important.
like couches and
TVs
TVs
exactly.
and beds and stuff?
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree.
Totally. Stuff that you have to somehow fund.
It's funny when you do, I've had to get rid of them. I remember I put stuff in storage once in Australia. Like I put 4 boxes in 4 of my friends' attics.
Great.
And then years went by, and then they go, I still have fucking 2 boxes of yours in my attic, and we're moving house.
Yeah.
He said, what do you want me to do with them? I said, have a quick look and see if there's anything that I would need, in your opinion, in there.
That's great.
And then chuck it if
What'd
not.
you get?
Nothing.
Really?
Just threw them away.
That's amazing.
Craig Damrauer, thank you for joining me on A Pint with Seaniebee. It was great having that chat again. I learned a lot of stuff about you I didn't know, even though we've been drinking quite a lot. You never tell me, yeah. Wonderful to speak to you about your art, and I will see you next time.
Thank you, that was fun.